Hi everybody. Hannah has requested that I contribute a little something to the group, and though I am bashful about reading out loud, I wanted to share some information from this book that I've been reading. The cover fell off. It's called Back to Eden. It also got damaged. And it's by Jethro Kloss. It was first published in 1939, and it took about 40 years to write. And he was a nurse in northern Wisconsin, and he grew up on a farm that grew and produced to support a family. You know, not a commercial farm, and he collected herbs and basically believes in living close to the earth. And it has, case studies that are 100 years old. So I find a lot of it very interesting, some of it a little comical, but there are definitely nuggets of wisdom. So I wanted to read just a short chapter on fresh air and exercise. Since I feel like the shelter in place, I'm living in California in the Bay Area, and our shelter in place is now very strict, punishable by fine and imprisonment, and also has no end date. So this is our life right now. So I wanted to talk about fresh air and exercise. Through the lungs, the system receives life-giving air. One may live for many days without solid food and several days without even liquid food, but death comes in a few moments without air. The capacity for air can be greatly increased by proper exercising of the lungs, and has often been demonstrated in the treatment of consumption, which is heart disease. Air is a simple mixture of numerous gases, but it chiefly composes of oxygen and nitrogen. Life is more dependent upon the regular and adequate supply of oxygen than any other element. The nitrogen in the air dilutes the oxygen. As an atmosphere of pure oxygen, we would live so fast. In an atmosphere of pure oxygen, we would live so fast as to be very short-lived. This is a side note, that's because we would increase our cellular respiration. Experiments have shown that prolonged inhalation of air in which the proportion of oxygen is much greater than that in which it normally occurs in the atmosphere causes great disturbance of the system and finally death. Therefore, we know that the mixture called air is not an accidental compound, and that one perfectly and admirably accepted, but one perfectly and admirably adapted, to the needs of human beings as well as animals and plants. I'm a very nervous reader. Side note that breathing pure oxygen has its complications, is basically what he's saying. The water vapor in the air is necessary to enable the lungs to utilize the oxygen readily, as is shown by experiments that prove that dry oxygen is not as readily absorbed as that which contains the proper proportion of moisture. A great change occurs in the blood when it passes through the capillaries of the lungs. As the pulmonary arteries brings the blood from the right heart to the lungs, it is a dark purple color. Its color is due to the carbonic acid and impurities which it contains. Then, when it leaves the lungs, it is a bright red, having exchanged the poisons for oxygen. This oxygen is then absorbed by the red blood corpuscles and taken to every part of the system, and is assimilated in the capillaries of the tissue. The blood then gathers up carbonic acid and goes back to the lungs to be cleansed again. Other impurities are also given out in the lungs. The blood is slightly colored and loses some of its water as it passes through the lungs. So we're losing carbonic acid. The blood is slightly cooled and loses some of its water as it passes through the lungs. So it's cooling and it's a little bit dehydrating. The amount of carbonic acid exhaled during digestion is greatly diminished by the use of stimulating foods, sugar, animal foods, and more explicitly wine, rum, beer, ale, tea, and coffee. Strenuous exercises increases the exhalation of carbonic acid as to 6 times the ordinary amount. So, it's harder for us to get rid of carbonic acid when we eat stimulating foods, sugar, animal products, and alcohol, and coffee. And then exercise increases it 6-fold. The lungs can and should be greatly improved by systematic exercise. When the lungs are not well expanded habitually, they lose to a greater or less degree their elasticity. In many cases, there is almost total loss of power to really expand the chest, which is very necessary to perfect health development. When a person feels weary and exhausted from sedentary employment, the practice of deep breathing and prolonged respiration, with the spine erect and the chest well expanded, will prove very refreshing and will introduce restful, sound sleep. A great advantage of abundance of lung exercise. The great advantage of abundance of lung exercise is seen in the fact that professional singers suffer less from lung afflictions than others. The chest of professional singers is always better developed than the majority of persons. The detrimental effects of breathing impure air, especially in a room where there are several people, are headache, nervousness, dullness, and aggravation of all diseases pertaining to lung afflictions. The headaches with which school children are afflicted are often caused by foul air. Consumption is most frequent in those whose habits, vocations, or occupations are sedentary, and they are usually kept in an atmosphere of foul air. An old army surgeon who had charge of large hospitals during the war related a very interesting experience illustrating the importance of giving the sick, especially persons suffering with fever, the abundance of pure air. He said that in a large hospital, he had at one time 320 cases of measles during the winter season. The hospital caught fire and burned to the ground. The patients had to be placed in tents. All but 1 or 2 recovered. That's out of 320. He said he had no doubt that the number of deaths would have been 30 or 40 at least had the patients remained in the hospital. So people with measles are sleeping in tents, and the death rate is reduced by 15-fold, 20-fold, according to this doctor. This would have been the First World War. Walking increases the inhalation of oxygen 3-fold. Regular exercise in the open air is one of the most important factors for preservation of health and prolongation of life. The degree of activity of life depends upon the amount of oxygen taken into our bodies. In cold weather, we get a larger supply of oxygen than in hot weather, and it makes us more active mentally and physically. Outdoor life in the cool, fresh air of temperate zones gives a stronger constitution and increases our resilience against disease. It is a well-known fact that the inhabitants of temperate zones have far more energy than those of the tropics. A sound and vigorous body can only be produced by pure blood and healthy nerves. He's also much about like nervous conditions, which I feel like is anxiety and depression. And so when he talks about nerves or nervous conditions, it's kind of like mental health related or nervous system stuff. Oxygen, the elixir of life, is one of the best blood purifiers and one of the most effective nerve tonics. It is simply provided by nature for all. Useful work in the open air will bring new strength and vitality and give a happy and cheerful attitude of mind. If the poisonous waste matter, which should be thrown off by exhalations from the lungs, is retained, the blood becomes impure, and not only the lungs, but the stomach, liver, and brain are affected. The digestion is retarded, the skin becomes sallow, and the brain clouded, and the thoughts confused, the heart depressed, and the whole system inactive and very susceptible to disease. All right, so pretty much everything is poisoned if we don't expand those lungs and get fresh air outside pumping, like through. And he actually shows here some images of what he thinks some good exercises are for the lungs outside. That makes sense. You know, you're kind of bending and squishing the lungs in that position. Proper exercise in the open air and sunshine are among God's greatest gifts to man. It gives good form and strength to the physical organism, and all other habits being equal in the surest safeguard against disease and premature death. It gives buoyancy. It gives buoyancy, free from extremes resulting from artificial life. Just get outside and move. Every room, and especially every sleeping room in the house, should be well ventilated throughout the year, both day and night. Have plenty of light and sunshine and air, which is wisely mixed by our gracious God in your houses to make you strong, healthy, and happy. And that's all we've got on that chapter. I keep my windows open all the time. And I've been jumping rope outside trying to get that sunshine and air, but I thought this is some interesting knowledge I wanted to share with you guys, and I will probably when prompted to help create content for you guys, I will probably be reading from this book again, Back to Eden by Jethro Kloss. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This book is almost 700 pages long, so I'll find some good stuff for you. All right, take care, everybody.